after, I'm going to take my duty as manager as well as introducer seriously, and I'm going to introduce Ken Smith, and now I'm going to mute you all.
Can I make a correction?
Yes, you can.
I know I misspell words, and I will probably do it during my talk, but it's Schmitz.
Schmitz. Yes.
You're doing the English translation of German.
I know, and it's Kenneth with an H at the end.
Exactly right.
Okay, I'm now going to mute you guys, except for Ken. He should be. Ken, unmute yourself now. Ken, please unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted?
Now you're unmuted.
Okay, because I don't know how I got muted.
I muted everyone so that there is not the background noise of people coming in and having their meal or whatever. And by the way, everyone, welcome. You can go on the top right view and put it as side-by-side speaker if you just want to see Ken's face when he presents his presentation. By the way, as an introduction, I want to tell you that among all of you that are there, Ken is the one that I know longest, because I just looked up that in 1982, I met Ken for the first time in Tilton, New Hampshire, at a Gordon conference when I just had started my work in UC Davis on chromatin, and it was a chromatin conference, and Ken was the one of the participants. I know I had a conversation with him, probably about chromatin, but I have no recollection of what actually we talked about. Ken, I met secondly when I came here to UMKC in '88, and he was in chemistry. He is no longer in chemistry because he is an emeritus professor in chemistry and member of the Emeritus College. And he's going to tell us about the Trojan horse, science deniers in politics. Anyone that wants to have questions, please use the chat feature. And at the end, I will unmute everyone, and then we can have a face-to-face conversation. But at the moment, Ken, the word is yours.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted. You're doing fine. You can go ahead.
Okay, because I became muted and it said press Control A. So, okay, we ready?
Yep.
Okay.
What?
I was going to listen in.
Okay.
Okay. The subtitle here is A Little Lie and a Big Lie, a Personal View. By the way, this talk is supposed to be both entertaining and informative.
Oh, now I can follow it.
Yeah.
The Trojan horse is, I chose that because of this book that has to do with intelligent design. And the Trojan horse, the little lie is the horse, the big lie is the soldiers inside the Trojan horse. Intelligent design attempted basically to penetrate society with respect to the Wedge document. And the intelligent design father, Philip Johnson, he's a lawyer. And as a lawyer, all he thought he had to do was just raise reasonable doubt with respect to Darwinism. So he wrote this book, Darwin on Trial. But what he didn't realize that science itself is based on doubt. Now here is the little I and the big lie. They introduced the intelligent design as an alternative theory for the atheistic Darwinian view, the little I. That's the wedge that is to divide the people. And the big lie is once you have gotten Darwinism and intelligent design taught side by side, then they are to infiltrate all aspects of society with the intelligent design philosophy. That's the big lie. Now I'm going to talk about political solutions to scientific problems with respect to the coming election. Global warming and COVID-19 pandemic are two of the major factors. Fool me twice, the fight for fighting the assault on science in America. Sean Lawrence Otto has pointed out that in this particular book, there were only 2 scientists in the House of Representatives at that time. Both were physicists. Holt said, countless issues to have scientific and technological components, but the issues are not seen as scientific issues. Of the 435 representatives in the House, 240 don't know much about science and choose not to. Now, here are 2 examples. One example is that a member was pushing to cut the budget for game theory. He didn't realize that game theory dealt with economics, not sports. Another colleague wanted to cut ATM research because that should be the banking industry, right? Everybody goes to the ATM machine, but ATM stands for asynchronous transfer mode, a fiber optic transfer protocol. So the essence of this presentation, Blaise Pascal, words differently arranged have different meanings, and meanings differently arranged have different effects. We're going to see Frank Luntz later on in this talk. What he basically says is it's not what you say, it's what people hear. So this is an audience participation experiment, so pay attention. This is a classroom experiment we're going to look at. Water, H2O, when it dissociates, has equal numbers of hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions. And on this particular scale, that gives a pH of 7. Now, if you take carbon dioxide and bubble it in water, it forms carbonic acid, and that dissociates and increases the hydrogen ion concentration. The pH of this is 5.6. So what that means is a pH less than 7 is acidic. Now, here are the 2 sentences I want you to look at for a couple of moments. And the question is, which one of these 2 sentences is correct, or do they both say the same thing? Now, if you look at this sentence, you want to find out what is the difference. Well, this is the points to look at. Oceans did not become acidic versus carbon dioxide that dissolves in seawater forms carbonic acid, which in turn acidifies the oceans. So the question is, did not become acidic and acidifies, are they saying the same thing? Now, the oceans, experimentally, if you want to call it that, it has a pH of 8.2 before the Industrial Revolution, and now it's at 8.1. Since the pH is greater than 7, the oceans are basic. So what's the difference between the 2? We're adding carbon dioxide to the ocean and also to water. The thing is, oceans have dissolved salts, which are buffering agents. The classroom experiment is done in pure water. So the first sentence is correct, but this is a means of misleading the people by putting in words that seem like it's the same thing, but they're actually not. So let's characterize the American public. There's 2 types of thinking that we're looking at here, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And the second one is by Randy Olson. Randy Olson was educated in marine biology, and he decided to go into filmmaking. So he went to Southern California, University of Southern California, to study filmmaking. And he did a documentary, which I recommend, Don't Be Such a Dodo, Flock of Dodos. It's about intelligent design. But his teacher said there's basically 4 types of organs that you can associate with thinking. Gut thinking is intuition, heart thinking is emotion, Of course, that's fast thinking, what you do on the spot. Head thinking is logic. You think things out. The other is sex organs, and there wasn't anything associated with any kind of thinking with that part. Now, with respect to issues, it's a three-ring circus. You follow the data, you follow the money, or you follow the tribe. That's head thinking, gut thinking, and heart thinking. Pew Research Center gave a test, what Americans know about science. Now I'm putting down here what they did not know and the percentage of wrong answers. Now it's understandable that a large percentage might not know that antacids are bases because you basically would have to take a chemistry course for that. The thing I find interesting is seasons result because of the tilt of the earth. This is something I learned in grade school, yet 37% of the people didn't know that. The other three items happen to have been in the news in the last few years: genetic engineering, deforestation, and fossil fuels. So this is what Americans do not know about science. So the conclusion is Americans have a lack of understanding basic science. Sir Martin Rees wrote this book, Our Final Century. If you buy this in England, the title is Our Final Century. But if you buy it in the United States, the title is Our Final Hour. And Martin Rees has an explanation why the title is different. Americans are impatient. I was playing blackjack at Harrah's a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, and two young ladies came to the table, and one of them, they both ordered Bailey's Irish Cream, and one said, "Gee, I wonder what's in it." I said I had a recipe for homemade Bailey's Irish Cream. So I began to give them the ingredients: Jameson Irish whiskey, raw eggs, instant coffee, Eagle brand milk, Hershey's chocolate, and then they lost interest after 5 ingredients. So my conclusion is Americans have short attention spans. So now if you take these 3 characterizations of the American public, lack of understanding basic science, impatience, and short attention span, how do you convince them to take on your point of view? And the answer basically is simple. You use sound bites. You Twitter your points, and you appeal to their emotions. The environment, this is government manipulation of the people, and this is illustrating these points. Frank Luntz wrote a White House memo in 2002. He was a consultant for the Republican Party, and it had to do with the environment. And what he said, this is the subject matter, and I'm going to take these underlined words and make it so it's more legible. Because they are primarily emotional in nature, they cannot be blunted with logic or statistics. Therefore, any discussion on the environment has to be grounded in an effort to reassure a skeptical public that you care about the environment for its own sake, that your intentions are strictly honorable. Let's look at the following paragraph. Again, the underlined words are, once you are able to establish your environmental bona fides, once you show people that your heart is in the right place and make them comfortable listening to what you have to say, then the conservative free market approach to the environment actually has potential to be quite popular. So what they have done, in essence, is change an environmental issue to an economic issue. Global warming, climate change. Today, fortuitously, if you want to call it that, October 12th, in 2007, the International Panel of Climate Change and Al Gore got the Nobel Prize for climate change. Arose by any other name. We're going to talk about evolution of terms for the phenomena. Here are 2 books. Basically, they're saying by going from global warming to climate change, you're increasing the number of things you can discuss: floods, snowstorms, etc. The question is, who said it? This book says the climatologists did it. This book says marketing men behind the scam. And Trump basically says scientists don't know what they're talking about. It used to be global warming, now it's climate change. Turns out Frank Luntz came into this again. It's time for us to start talking about climate change instead of global warming and conservation instead of preservation. He has study groups, and climate change is less frightening than global warming. And one person said, well, it's just like going from Pittsburgh to Fort Lauderdale. Global warming has a catastrophic connotations attached to it. Climate change suggests a more controllable and less emotional challenge. It was the politicians who introduced climate change to replace global warming for political reasons, but it was a good thing for the wrong reason. Let's look at the relationship of terms. We're burning fossil fuels, excuse me. And what that does is that it contributes to global warming. Now, why is this? Because when you burn fossil fuels, you put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and the Earth being curved as well as rotating, the energy of the sun that's being absorbed on the Earth is not uniformly distributed. So that creates energy gradients, if you will. That moves the air, that moves the moisture in the air, and that leads to global warming when you're raising that. And global warming, because you're moving these gradients, leads to climate change. So these two are interrelated. Global warming and climate change are interrelated. What's coming out, or what has come out, is another term, ecological disruption. And I noticed that I put down other things that are causing it besides the link through burning fossil fuels. So what the critics are saying, oh, you're changing the terminology. You're putting cold spells, floods, snows, storms, etc., under climate change. Well, the point is, global warming is the cause because you're setting up these gradients, and the effect is the climate change because that's moving these materials around, the air around. So they're interconnected. So whatever you can attribute to climate change, you can also attribute to global warming. Ecological disruption, I'm looking at the definition of disruption. This is what I am criticizing here. It's a break or interruption in the normal course or continuation of some activity. Now, here's a very good example of disruption.
In the motion picture industry, we do not, thank God, contribute to the shambles by manufacturing tanks, flamethrowers, or rockets. We do something to try and help keep people sane. We turn out entertainment. The award for the best picture is never lightly given. And now, to divulge the contents of this year's most important envelope is a very important contributor to world entertainment, and someone quite likely that was almost bound to happen. But isn't it fascinating that probably the only love that man will ever get in his life is by stripping off and showing his shortcomings. If I might continue with the introduction of our very important, worldwide, much beloved entertainer, I'll give you a little hint as to who it is, because she's someone, perhaps, who is likely to have not only breakfast, but luncheon and dinner at Tiffany's.
Now, what you saw there was after the disruption, everything went back to normal. So let's look at the sequence of events. The burning of fossil fuels leads to global warming, leads to climate change, and that leads to ecological disruption. If you look at the scope of things covered, they increase. Burning fossil fuel is relatively small, but ecological disruption not only takes into consideration climate change, but other things as well. Now, how are these described? Irreversible and frightening, less emotional, and temporary. So you look at it this way, the basis of the economy and global warming brings out fear, but climate change says, oh, that's really not so bad. And ecological disruption says, oh, don't worry, be happy. And if you look at this, the severity that's conveyed decreases. It's not so bad with this ecological disruption. But let's look at what other is. We have global warming and other. What is other? Here's a hint. We've got to pause and ask ourselves, how much clean air do we need? Other, I'm including pollution of air, water, and land, but I'm also including population. The increase in population has an important effect on the environment. Remember that Earth is a palindrome. There is no Earth B. And here's my prime example with respect to population. This is a 55-gallon fish tank. I started out with 3 fish. Eventually, there grew to be more than 50 fish. And not long after this picture, they were all dead. They could not be sustained in the environment. When you're looking at ecological books, you might see spheres. Everything is a sphere. There's the atmosphere, the biosphere. It gives the impression that everything is separate. If we do something to the atmosphere, it doesn't affect the biosphere. But back in 1900, John Muir said, when I try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. So this is how things should be looked, and the Land Institute is viewing it from an ecosystem. Everything is interacting. We are part of the environment. This also goes, this is a couple of days ago, with respect to the coming election. The Democrats put climate change and coronavirus top on the list and the economy 4th down. The Republicans put the economy at the top of the list and coronavirus is way at the bottom. What's wrong with this picture? The climate change and coronavirus are the cause of our drop in economy. So they are the cause, and this is the effect. So the Democrats are approaching and trying to solve the cause, whereas the Republicans are trying to put Band-Aids on the effect. Now, carbon dioxide concentration. This is how carbon dioxide warms the Earth. You have sunlight coming in, it hits the Earth, infrared radiation is radiated back out, the carbon dioxide absorbs it, your carbon dioxide rotates and it randomly lets go of this absorbed energy. And some of it comes back to the Earth. So we have a temperature, we have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and let's put a rain cloud, a dark cloud. And the sunlight coming to the cloud, a lot of it's reflected back, that's why it's dark. Some of it comes through, but the temperature drops because it's getting colder. A dark cloud coming between you and the sun, the area becomes cold, noticeably cold. So let's let a regular cloud come by. It's light, it's fluffy, it's white. More sunlight comes through. It gets to the Earth and carbon dioxide absorbs it and brings it back down to the Earth, and the temperature rises. So if you increase the carbon dioxide concentration by this simple picture, you must draw the conclusion that the temperature is going to rise. But that's not what people think, some of them. Right now, the carbon dioxide concentration is 420 parts per million. It's so minuscule, it can't possibly affect the temperature of this planet. Here's a book that I like, but I bought because of the bet primarily. It's to win a bet on a little known fact that climatologists, that challenges the entire climate change premise. The little known fact is what's being the bet. Here is the bet. You're going to win this bet. Go into a bar. How much of our atmosphere is carbon dioxide? Well, after accounting for the oxygen, 21%, nitrogen, 78%, argon, 1%, check the facts yourself, a quote. It turns out the amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere to the nearest percentage is 0. All we have to do is round up the numbers. It's gone. In other words, 0.04% is 0. Here's a fallacy in that argument, and we're going to check this out. You can do this. This is something I found very interesting when I did it. Let's use the ideal gas law. Pressure is the P, temperature is a temperature, R is a gas constant, N is a Avogadro's number. I'll tell you what these are later. You don't need to worry about doing the math because it's done for you. So we have 1 atmosphere pressure. The temperature is 298 Kelvin, which is basically 66 degrees Fahrenheit. Avogadro's number is 6.02 times 10 to the 23. What is that? Well, if you take 8 milliliters of water, you've got Avogadro's number of molecules of water. For the bakers, that is 0.61 US fluid ounces. For the drinkers, that's 0.61 US shot glasses or 0.41 jiggers. So let's calculate this number. It's a big number, 10 to the 27. We can't comprehend, or 10 to the 22. We can't comprehend that large of a number, but we want to know the number of carbon dioxide molecules per liter. So what we do is we multiply by that ratio, 0.04%, and we come up with another big number. We're not used to this big number, and this is per liter. So let's change it to something else. Let's change it to dollar bills. We can all think money. So what we're going to do is for every carbon dioxide molecule in a liter of atmosphere, we're going to put a dollar bill on a pile. And we're going to keep doing that, and we're going to stack up a large pile. And so how are we going to calculate the number of dollar bills or the height of the pile? Well, the thickness of a dollar bill is 0.0043 inches. And that's about $232. Now, if you do the multiplication, this is the number of inches. That's a big number. Let's put it into something that we can possibly comprehend. Let's put it into billions of miles. 716 billion miles high. That is the height of the stack of dollar bills. Pluto is 4.6 billion miles from Earth. The stack of dollar bills is roughly 153 times the distance to Pluto. It is, with Voyager 1, which was launched in 1977, roughly 53 times further from the Earth than Voyager 1. So that's a lot, but that's only for 1 quart. How many quarts are in the atmosphere? The percentages might be small, but the absolute numbers are large. And besides that, oxygen and nitrogen do not interact with the infrared. They do not contribute to global warming. Carbon dioxide is the only molecule in the atmosphere that significantly contributes to global warming. Coronavirus. Let's look at polio as an example. This is a timeline. The Salk started his studies in 1953, began the trials in 54. It was announced, the results were announced in 56. That's a 3-year period. Almost 40 years later, polio was declared eliminated from the Americas. COVID-19, it goes to the lungs. And don't expect the vaccine soon. The soonest that Financial Times estimates for everyone will not be until 2024. No, viruses are not alive, therefore they cannot be killed. What is life? NASA needs to know this. When they're sending probes to other planets, they need to be able to identify what life is. And here's 7 characteristics of life. Growth and change, an external source of molecules for growth. Animals eat food, they digest it. Plants absorb nutrients through the roots, breathe through the leaves. Being made of cells. A cell wall is made of a phospholipid. You have a hydrophobic chain that hates water, and you have a hydrophilic part. And the hydrophobic chains get together and form the cell wall. And the interior of the cell wall is oily, it's organic. Well, how do you get inorganic things through the cell wall? And the answer is you have protein channels. Some of them are passive, they're always open, things fly back and forth. Others are active. This is a sodium channel. What happens is this protein here undergoes a conformational change, and that opens up and allows the sodium ions to pass through into the next cell. Cells, there's 2 types of cells we're interested in, eukaryote and prokaryote. The eukaryote cells have a nucleus. Eukaryotic cells, here's basically all the stuff that's in the cell. There's a lot of molecules, there's a lot of activity going on there. You have to have a cell and a cell wall to contain these molecules so they don't wander off, so they can do their jobs. You have to have a cell wall. What about growth and reproduction? If you take human DNA and stretch it out as a rod, it is more than 6 feet in length. And as Sam Friedberg said, how do you get 8 great tomatoes in that itty bitty can? You fold it up, you've got chromosomes. Now, the genetic code, adenine and thymine, they hook up with each other. Cytosine and guanine, they hook up with each other. So these bases along the DNA, those are the letters that make up the words of the genetic code. So in order to get to it, you have to somehow open up the DNA so you have a molecule, an enzyme that unwinds the DNA. That's the replication fork. And you've got these free nucleotides floating around. So you have to have another enzyme that puts things together and sews it up. Metabolism, all these chemical reactions are going to require energy. The energy molecule in the cell is adenosine triphosphate, ATP. The energy bond is this 3rd phosphate that's attached to it. So this is, when this bond breaks, that provides energy for the chemical reactions that are in the cell. Now here's a tobacco leaf. It has virus. The virus gives spots, so that's why it's called tobacco mosaic virus. It is very simple. It's got 1 molecule of RNA, and it's surrounded by protein in terms of capsids, and that gives a rod-like shape. It can't do any chemical reactions. It's not alive. It can't reproduce. The same thing with COVID-19. It has fat and protein on the outside. The RNA is on the inside. Now, how does coronavirus replicate? Well, we've got the eye, nose, and mouth. We've got the skin on the outside. And there was supposed to be a cough. I don't know why it didn't show up. There we go. Sneeze, rather, I'm sorry. Okay, expulsion of droplets. This happens in breathing, speaking softly, coughing, speaking loudly, and singing or sneezing. And what happens is the coronavirus gets to the cell, gets to the skin, gets into the cell, penetrates the cell, gets inside the nucleus, and replicates. Here is how you prevent it. Common sense. Don't face each other. Wear masks or other facial protection. Practice social distancing and isolation, which is lockdown. Don't let any expulsion get into somebody else's face or eyes or whatever. If you haven't seen it before, this is an electron micrograph. Here's the COVID-19 in action, so to speak, the little blue dots. Now, this is what Johns Hopkins recommends in terms of COVID-19. Destroy COVID-19. I have to emphasize external. Anybody that says internal, don't believe them. What you're doing is you're looking at the physical and chemical properties of COVID-19. We have fat. How do you destroy fat? Try this yourself. Boil water and put in a stick of butter. Melts the butter. Disperse the fat. Use detergent. If you use hot water, it works better. Dissolve the fat. Alcohol or any mixtures. Sorry, it can't be vodka. It could be Listerine, though, because it has to be greater than 65% alcohol. What about the protein? How do you destroy the protein? Well, you dissolve the protein, 1 part bleach and 5 parts water, or you use a UV light, and that breaks up the protein molecule. So that's how you destroy COVID-19 if it's on your hands or whatever, your furniture or whatever. Now, here's another thing from the Pew Research Center. This scientist has this test medicine for ear infections, and he tells them put 10 drops in the infected ear each day, and 2 weeks later, there are no more infections. Now, the question is, how do you improve on this? And that's what the survey is asking, and here are the possible answers. And the answer is create a second group with ear infections that don't use the drops. In other words, it's the equivalent of a placebo. Now, this is a vaccine testing and approval process, CDC. There's a layer and layer and layer and layer of things to do, protocols and protocols. We want to get to the clinical development. Phase 1, the objective is safety and dosage. How safe is this material? You only need a small number of people, 20 to 100. It could be several months. Phase 2, is it doing what it's supposed to do? The efficacy. What are the side effects? Several hundred people with the disease, months to 2 years. Phase 3, primarily monitoring of adverse reactions. 300 to 300,000 volunteers who have the disease or a condition, 1 to 4 years. And then phase 4, we're not going to worry about it, but it's more safety conditions. The most important is phase 3, and AstraZeneca put hold on their COVID-19 vaccine experiments because 1 person exhibited neurological symptoms during phase 3. I'll let you read this. The survey says that 90% of the evangelicals will vote for Trump no matter what. There's the 10%. This is in the Washington Post just yesterday. I'm a pro-life evangelical. In supporting Trump, my movement sold its soul. The Electoral College elected the president. He says coronavirus will go away, so will global warming. He appointed a lifetime science denier, climate denier, for running NOAA. I don't think science actually knows. This is with respect to California wildfires and climate change. And just yesterday, the GOP has a long history of ignoring science. Trump turned it into a policy. So Donald Trump is a self-proclaimed anti-science savant. I may have to, these are the faults of Donald Trump that shows that he is not a scientist. The trouble with Trump is that he remains authentically inauthentic. He doesn't read, doesn't question, doesn't think beyond his own reflexive outrage. The scientist questions everything. This is a Trump quote. Scientists also say that there are nerve cells that in the gut that are connected to the intuitive part of the brain. When something is right or wrong, I actually feel it in my gut. Gut, that's intuition. That's a scientific hypothesis. In layman's terms, That's an uneducated guess. Donald also attributed his talent for, debuted his talent for manipulating the truth, sworn or otherwise. Scientific fact, an observation that's been repeatedly confirmed is accepted as true. Head logic, that is a scientific theory, a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of nature that incorporates facts, laws, inferences, and tested hypotheses. The scientific theory is the most important of these groups of terms because it provides an explanation. This is an assumption. At the Trump rally on February 28th, the coronavirus, this is a new hoax. Because we went early, we could have a lot more than that. And this is what it was back then, February. Cases, March, 5,000 cases. This is a one-day list of changes. One day, September 1st, 7-day average per day, August 31st. All of these numbers on one day. He's very astute. This is from Democracy Now!, the recount. This is what Trump said to the general public. We have it totally under control. It's one person coming from China, pretty much shut it down. When it gets warm, historically, it has been able to kill the virus. It's going to disappear one day like a miracle. It will disappear and you will be fine. I don't take any responsibility at all. This is a pandemic. I thought it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic. All you had to do is look at other countries. What did he say to Bob Woodward during the same period of time? It goes through the air, Bob. You just breathe the air and that's how it's passed. Also more deadly than even your strenuous flus. It's so easily transmissible, you wouldn't believe it. This thing is a killer. It's like the plague. It's the plague. I'll let you read the bottom. Now it's turning out it's not just old people, Bob. Today and yesterday, some startling facts came out. Young people too, plenty of young people. Trump said athletes want to play football in the worst way, and they did. This is quoted because it's a Kansas State college football team. They had no coronavirus, and then it shut down. I still like playing it down because I don't want to create a panic. What does that mean? Playing it down explains the news conference. They wanted me to come out and scream, people are dying, we're dying. We did it just the right way. Problem is people are dying because of lies and inaction. That's a 1 month period. Changes. We did it just the right way. The Trump's attendees think that. Inspires solution.
I've got you under my skin.
Recommended marijuana drug. This seemed not to do any good. Okay, there's no evidence that it could do any good, and it might do more harm. It also recommended a cocktail, and this particular cocktail increased the death rate by 27%, just a little drawback. The convalescence plasma, historical breakthrough. The World Health Organization says there's no evidence of anything except perhaps low quality trials. Enthusiasm for oleandrin from the oleander plant. Well, his buddy, Mike Lindell, who started MyPillow, contributed to Trump's fund. He owns money. He put a financial stake in this company. Assimilate. Go it alone proposition. The American drug companies can do just as well, if not better, than the combined efforts of all other countries in finding a vaccine for COVID-19. That's the little lie. What is he really doing? He wanted to have WHO because they're associated with China. That rekindled Trump's administration's effort to stop American drug companies getting their dependence on China. That's the big lie. That's the reason he wants to do it. Politics before the needs of the people. Aspirins. Trump fixates on promises of a vaccine, real or not, as the key to the re-election bid. The earliest for a tested vaccine is 18 months. The scientists, the people who are making the vaccine, working on the vaccine, there will be no shortcuts. It's not going to be before the election. Esteem, Anthony Fauci, held in high esteem, 50 years the American Public Health Director of National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease, advisory to every president since Reagan. Then he said something Trump didn't like. It was against his views. Fauci was dropped. And we have a new pandemic advisor who likes the herd immunity. So this is absurd, assuming that a significant number of people have recovered from the disease, and you assume non-immunity people are widely distributed. So you have people that are immune and vaccinated. So this is what the normal condition would be. You have the population, somebody gets the virus, and then that virus is transmitted to others. Now, with the herd immunity, you have people separated. So if one person gets the virus, there's nobody around them, everybody's immune, so it basically dies. But the problem is we don't have a vaccination. So we're only going by those who are immune for this to work. So here's a population. Some of them get the virus. Some of them become immune, they recover. What happens to the others? They die. Who are the experimental subjects for herd immunity study? We are. 1% of the population of the United States will probably die. It didn't work in Sweden, and England dropped it. Prologue. Trump says he deserves an A+, September 22nd, for his pandemic work. A week or so later, he develops the virus. He goes to Walter Reed Hospital. Deteriorating conditions include fever, coughing, and congestion. He's been given experimental antibody treatment as well as antiviral remdesivir. Okay, here is Trump's treatment. Dexamethasone, that is a steroid, anti-inflammatory, immunosuppressant, typically reserved for serious or more advanced COVID-19 cases. Regnin COVID-2, this is experimental. This is Regeneron Pharmaceuticals that are doing it. It reduces the viral levels. That's not the same as a cure. Here is a model structure of the antibody, 3 arms. The important thing here are these parts here. This is where the recognition is located. And what happens is the COVID-19 virus has binding sites, if you will, on those protein arms that attach to the cell. So the object is to get a molecule here on these arms so that they will interfere and they will block the virus from attaching to the cell walls. Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, they started these studies in early 2020. 2020. It is a clinical trial that started in September 2020 with 275 outpatients. There's actually 2 molecules as shown at the top. It's a cocktail. There are 10 people who are not in the clinical study, but they have compassionate use. In other words, the doctor requested that they be given this experimental drug. And of course, Donald Trump is one of those.
Like unbelievable. I felt good immediately. I felt as good 3 days ago as I do now. They call them therapeutic, but to me it wasn't therapeutic. It just made me better. Okay, I call that a cure. I want everybody to be given the same treatment as your president because I feel great. I feel like perfect. So I think this was a blessing from God that I got it. This was a blessing in disguise. I want to get for you what I got, and I'm going to make it free.
The little lie, but to me it wasn't therapeutic. It just made me feel better. I call it a cure. Treating the symptoms, Trump feeling better, is not the same thing as the cure, which is eliminating the cause. The big lie, I want everybody to get the same treatment as your president, and I'm going to make it free. That is basically an invitation to say, vote for me, I'm saving you. And he can't save him because this drug has only been in experimental use for a little more than a month. It's going to be years before it's approved. And not only that, it's going to be even more years to get everybody vaccinated against COVID-19. We're talking several years. The population in the United States relative to the world population is around 4%. The COVID cases, United States versus the world, is around 22%. The deaths is around 21%.
In our response, we shouldn't have 50 different responses in the United States. You should have a coordinated national plan. The CDC was set up originally to give sound medical guidance to health and county commissioners. The CDC has been neutered to not be able to do its job back in May.
China in the United States, a difference in leadership. This is in time, this is a couple days ago. Despite the strong COVID-19 rebound, China isn't going back to normal anytime soon. Okay, that's a given. But what about the rebound? The government's unprecedented capacity for surveillance, large-scale testing, contact tracing, and quarantine helped contain the outbreak inside China within 2 months. China hasn't had any serious outbreaks over the past month. Mike Pence, in the vice presidential debate, he's head of the coronavirus task force, made the statement, President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. And it was an outdoor event, the Rose Garden. The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. They have done nothing. Our administration has done zero in terms of curbing the coronavirus. Now, here is an oddity, a rarity. The New England Journal of Medicine, dying in a leadership vacuum. This is a couple of days ago also. With no good options to combat the novel pathogen, countries were forced to make hard choices about how to respond. Here in the United States, our leaders have failed that test. They have taken a crisis and turned it into a tragedy. Here's some ratios. In the United States, more than double Canada, exceeds Japan by a factor of almost 50. For low and middle income countries, it's a factor of 2,000. When it comes to the response to the largest public health crisis in our time, our current political leaders have demonstrated they are dangerously incompetent. We should not abet them and enable the deaths of thousands more Americans by allowing them to keep their jobs. Take-home lesson. Gut thinking cannot solve science-based issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I want to give the possibility no one put anything in the chat box, but I think Ken is quite willing probably to answer any questions. So if you terminate the shared screen, then
Okay, how do I terminate the share screen?
by going to your view options at the top and stop participant sharing.
I don't see that.
Okay.
I have mouse, select, text,
Okay.
draw, stamp, whatever.
Okay. Can you?
Okay,
Yes.
but I did. Okay, never mind. Yeah, okay, I'm on it now. I closed out my PowerPoint.
Good.
So I see you now.
Okay. Now we can go to gallery view and you can entertain any questions people have. If you're muted, unmute yourself, please, and ask your questions.
Now, where do I go to gallery view? Do I go to
No,
that?
that's doesn't matter at this point. Guys, any questions for Ken? Have no questions?
Yeah, I've got one. Thanks for that presentation, but I saw something about one of the drugs that he was treated with is developed from research done on fetal tissue. Have you seen anything about that? And I'm wondering why that's not getting more press.
No, I haven't seen anything
Okay.
on that. No.
I can probably comment on that. All the vaccines that are on, at the moment under development use cell lines that originally were fetal tissues in the 70s and 80s, identified and isolated from fetal aborted fetuses, that are the cell lines in which they produce the materials that make up the vaccines. So at the moment, what will look like a vaccine possibilities are all dependent on cell lines that under the Bush regulations should not have existed.
Are there any physical chemistry questions?
Hearing none.
I submitted a question via chat.
Oh,
Oh. How you doing, Charlie?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I don't see one in the chat, Charles. Just speak it out loud then.
Okay, my question had to do with more than carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, increasing methane levels and
Yeah.
nitrous oxide are not going to help things.
Exactly right. Carbon dioxide is, in terms of strength, methane is much stronger per molecule. That's true. And the problem is methane's going to be more in the atmosphere when you start melting ice, because there's a lot of methane, the permafrost and stuff like that has stored methane.
Okay. Seeing no more urgent questions, Ken, thank you very much for this presentation. Maybe the fact that the word political was in the title was a good giveaway that it was maybe not completely politically neutral, but in a time that we're living, I think voices should be heard.
I want to ask you a question. Name one thing that is politically neutral.
Nothing is.
And I wish to point out, I believe in fortuity, and it is the date was set almost a year ago on October 12th. And it just so happened 1 week before this date that Trump got the virus. And on this date, Gore and the IPCC received the Nobel Prize.
Okay. With that, Bibi.
I just want to thank Ken so much for this very graphic illustration of the problem that we lack scientific education in our schools.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you so much for illustrating this scary future.
As you might have gathered from my presentation, I'm perhaps much better at drawing than talking.
You did fine.
Yeah.
I'm teasing you.
Okay.
I'm just making a comment.
Okay. Thank you all for listening in to Ken's talk.